Hello everybody, Carol Garrison here with Carol's Creative Escape. It is Monday, September 9th, and it's time for another Make It Monday. Today is Monday, September 9th, and as I said, I'm Carol Garrison. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from White Bear Lake, Minnesota, and I have been making cards for 30-some years with the intent to spread joy one card at a time, and it looks like Zelda's going to join me here tonight. I was not live last week because of the Labor Day holiday. I did take a day off for that, and am happy to be back tonight. We'll get that cattail out of the camera here for a moment. Happy to be here again tonight to share with you a fun card. This is a technique I actually learned stamping all of the layers. It's a triple layer card, but instead of doing stamping to create my design, I'm actually using designer series paper and want to share with you a tip that I found just to make it a little bit easier for me as I'm making the cards. I hope everybody's had a great couple weeks since we last were live. With the Labor Day holiday, we'd always have a nice neighborhood picnic with a few of the families getting together and sharing a potluck. So that was kind of nice to see everybody. It was very nice to see all the neighbors again. And then this past weekend, we had the two grandkids for a chunk of Saturday. And so that was fun. It was a great day weather-wise outside. So we were able to be outside and spend some good running time with Cece in particular, so she could burn off a little bit of energy. So that part was very nice. Got to visit the apple orchard and pick up some apples. And so we're going to move the cat beyond here. But that's probably about all the excitement that I've got. I would like to share with you my card now. And Kim, thanks for joining in. I appreciate that. So give me a minute here as I switch cameras around. And again, I apologize for all the funny images you may see while I'm doing this. But, whoops, just dropped my pencil. All right, I'll get rid of that cord so you can't see that, hopefully. And my fancy dancy little camera stand here. All right. Let's get a little more light on my work surface. We're going to straighten things out because I think we can all agree it might be just a titch too crooked. Ooh, now that's really crooked, isn't it? Boy, you try to straighten stuff out and... All right, we're going to leave it at that because if I mess around with it, I could spend all night here trying to straighten it. And of course, I'm not done because now I realize it's crooked with the few minutes of delay time that I've got. This is good enough. All right, so we'll get over that. The card that I want to share with you is, like I said, it's a triple layer card, but it's done all with designer series paper. And what's fun is you can really use any combination of paper. Here I've got a happy anniversary. This is just using some heart paper and cardstock. This is using that wonderful Mediterranean designer series paper. Very summery, so I used the Hello Sunshine is what I was trying to convey there. And that comes from the Choose Happy stamp set. And it includes a sunshine, and then I just used the Hello stamp from in here too to create that Hello Sunshine. So you can see you can either go portrait or landscape. Here's a Happy New Year one. These two papers, if you're wondering, come from the mini catalog. I believe it might be an online exclusive actually, now that I think about it. It is the Iconic Celebrations Designer Series paper. And I've showed you this before. I've used a couple of these papers. And it's just got all sorts of holidays that you can celebrate with that paper. So I thought, well, it might be kind of fun. I'm doing all I can to get my Christmas cards out, but maybe it might be fun to send a Happy New Year card to somebody as well. And then finally, here's one using that gorgeous seasonal paper from, or Christmas paper from last year that carried over. And just so I'm sure I'm getting you the right name, maybe. That is the Winter Meadow Designer Series paper, and I was really trying to capture the deer. I think I would have to do some more fancy centering to kind of get that how I want it, but I didn't want to waste all that paper either. So we've got the little deer in the corner, and I just did gratitude so I could keep it a very simple little card and not detract from some of the paper. I think some of the things I did learn as I was assembling these cards is a colorful pattern, but not overly busy, makes for a good background for this paper. And by not overly busy, I just don't want like a large pattern that isn't going to show up when you go to cut it down. You kind of get a feel for it when you're playing with that. So I'm going to show you how to make this card tonight, and I am using the paper in the annual catalog. It's part of the Wildflower Designs bundle. It's on page 41 of the annual catalog. And it's just this lovely paper right here. And I will show you the little trick that I finally found. I struggled a little bit with cutting the Designer Series paper and had to, yikes, waste a little bit before I figured out the pattern. So the layers of paper that you need are 5.5 by 8.5, scored at 4 1/4. This is Misty Moonlight that I'm using, and I've already stamped it with my copyright mark. And then it's got another piece of cardstock that measures 3 1/4 by 4 1/2, and a second piece of cardstock that measures 2 1/4 by 3 1/2. Now, technically, you could do kind of the same technique that I'm going to show you with the Designer Series paper and get these 2 layers out of one piece of paper. I didn't want to spend quite that much time creating my layers, and so I just used some of my scraps and I got those 2 pieces. Totally up to you. I've also got a piece of 4 by 5 1/4 basic white for the inside of my card that I have pre-stamped. And for this, I am using the Let's Celebrate from the Simply Said stamp set, along with, for my front sentiment, Birthday Wishes. And then this candle, again, comes out of this Choose Happy. And I just use a little of my Daffodil Delight blend pen to color in the flames here. And I've got this offset because I used a scrap of my a scrap of my Designer Series paper. Sorry, she was scratching at the window screen. Designer Series paper to decorate the inside of my card. And then I've got a scrap of basic white that I used for stamping on this. This is actually measures 1 inch by 2 1/4. And I've used that measurement because it kind of fits. If I were to make this card go this way, it fits that layer, but also will fit nicely going with it vertical instead of horizontal. It's just how it worked. Lastly, I've got a piece of 4 by 5 1/4 inch Designer Series paper, and this is all you need to make all 3 layers of, sorry, I buried it as I was showing you different stuff here, to make all 3 layers of the card. So I was frugal with my Designer Series paper. And I know when I originally learned this technique, again, because I was stamping, you would just cut pieces of your cardstock. I've also used, if you have any of the rectangle dies or something like that, you could easily do this as well. But right now, I don't have any just plain rectangle dies. I have stitched ones and I have the deckled edges. but I wanted to have just a plain rectangle. So I want to show you the little trick that I followed. Now, if you remember, the cardstock was 3 1/4 by 4 1/2, with the next layer being 2 1/4 by 3 1/2. And so that means I need to make these all just a little bit smaller, but it goes down by 1 inch at a time. So this full sheet creates my outside layer. This layer is a 1/2 inch smaller, and this layer is a 1/2 inch smaller from this one, or 1 inch in from that base layer. Don't worry if that doesn't make sense right now. I'm going to make it all work for you. I took my trimmer and made sure my blades and my scoring piece were out of the way. And I'm using the back side of my paper. That's very important for this step, that you're using the back side of your paper. I've lined it up at the 1/2 inch mark. And I just took my pencil into the trough and lightly drew a pencil mark that I can see. It is helpful if you go all the way to the end, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. Don't press super hard because you can get kind of a score line in doing that. And then I'm just going to rotate and turn it 1/2 inch, or turn it each time, and then just do a score or a pencil line, pencil line at the 1/2 inch mark. And then that gives me my outside frame. The next layer, if you remember, that we're actually going to be marking for is this one. So that's 1 inch in from that base layer. So now I'm going to slide this down to the 1 inch mark and repeat that process. Now, you could certainly do the 1/2 inch, shift it to the 1 inch mark on each side before you rotated. Not a problem. I just wanted to make sure that I was showing really what I was doing to get my squares. Okay, whoops, that one I didn't mark at the edge. Okay, so now I've got my 4 layers marked, or my 3 layers marked on here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it right here and bring in my cutting blade. Now, whenever I'm cutting out kind of the insides of paper, I always like to have my cutting blade start somewhere in the middle and not right on the edge. That way I can press it down and I know it's kind of cut the paper. And I'm just going to slide my cutting blade up to that first pencil mark that I made going across. And then I'll slide it down and again hit that first pencil mark. If you're feeling really brave, you can again go cut that 1 inch mark. I actually found it easier to do each piece one at a time. Totally up to you how you do that. And again, I'm just cutting out that inside rectangle, so I'm careful to line up these lines each time in that cutting trough. Put my blade towards the middle, slide it up and down to each of the lines that I drew. And if you go a teeny bit over, don't worry about it, because the cardstock on your layer is going to cover that up anyhow. I even have one where I kind of cut a little too far, and I just put a piece of Scotch tape on the back side, and nobody knew. Okay, there's that piece. And now I'm going to line everything up again, kind of at that 1/2 inch mark. But again, most importantly, making sure that this part and this part are lined up with the trough. And I'm going to repeat the process, this time going all the way out to that line and sliding it all the way down to that line. Rotate it, hit the 1/2 inch mark, out to there, out to here, rotate, hit the 1/2 inch mark, slide it. Now, normally when I'm not on camera, I'm able to see a little bit better when I get to the end, so it's possible I'm going to be slightly off. But again, it doesn't matter just because of how we put our layers on. And now I've got my 3 layers of the designer series paper. So for assembly, let me show you what I did here. I'll get my cutter out of the way. I do recommend that you maybe start working off of your silicone mat for the first part of it. I am going to take these 2 inside pieces first. This one is very straightforward. It just requires my tape runner. And corner's a little curved in. I'm just going to center it right onto here. And again, I always recommend looking at the opposite corners for lining it up. If those are even, the other 2 corners should be even as well. So that's my first layer. That one is super easy. We're going to take this middle layer, and I like to use the liquid glue for this part of it. I use this handy dandy Tombow glue holder. I got this from one of my fellow stampers at the Country Hive. It works really nice to keep your glue always tilted upside down so that it's ready for you to use. So check it out at the Country Hive if you're interested in that. No money. I just find that it's a very easy tool to use, and so I wanted to share her site with you. And I'm just going to make a little bit of glue around the edge here, and then carefully lift it up to try to keep it off my fingers. That's always the tricky part. And then again, I'm going to set it down, looking to see that opposite corners are even, and I'll just press those pieces down. So I think you can kind of see how these layers are going to start coming together. To finish these 2 layers off, I'm just going to adhere this piece to here, and again, I'm going to use my tape runner. Light touch with that check mark, and you won't have to worry about it sticking up on itself. Before you fully adhere, make sure that you've got it lined up the right way with your flowers, because that's part of what we want to achieve with this technique, is lining up your designer series paper cuts. So now we've got those first 2 layers, and that brings us to this last layer. So we're going to take our cardstock and fold it in half, burnish that edge in really well with the bone folder, and then I'm going to grab this piece, and before you adhere it, I am going to recommend that you lay it down and make sure you have it going the right direction, because if you're opening your card up this way, this needs to be top to bottom. And we just want to make sure we know what we're doing when we're adding that final layer, which is going to go like that. So we are in the right direction. So I'm just going to flip it over this way. Again, like I did with that second layer, I'm going to grab my liquid glue. And put a little bit on the outside. And add it to the front of my card. Always double checking to make sure those opposite corners are even. There we go. And we'll press that down. And with the little bit of glue that I put on there, I really didn't have any problems with it oozing over. But I'd like to use that glue because it did give me the ability to wiggle and shift just a teeny bit if needed. And now all you need to do is take this layer and, whoops, add it. And remember how I said you had to make sure that you had it going the right way? There we go. Fortunately, I did get the base on correctly. I just didn't have this one twisted the right way. Get it lined up, and you're good to go. This is one of those papers where the flowers kind of go all over, so you could make an argument that it could go this way as well. But if you look at this flower down here, then it's going right with the flowers coming up. It just depends on the pattern of paper that you're using. So that gets the outside of the card. Let's go ahead and assemble our inside piece. And again, I always like to add just a little bit to dress up the inside of my card. And so this piece is, I think it's 3/4 of an inch by 5 inches. So it's going to fit in between the edges. So I want to just try to get as even a border as I can, top, bottom, and on that long edge. And hopefully still maintain a border between the candle too. So there we go. That was just a little scrap piece of paper. I figured I might as well use it for the inside of the card. And then I'll add my adhesive. And we will decorate. I pressed it down just a titch too soon. We will decorate the inside of the card. And so now we've got that, and the last piece that we need to do is add our sentiment. I have played a little bit with putting bows and ribbons and different things on this. I think this one could use just a little bit of sparkle. So I'm going to grab, I hope, you know, yesterday it was the only ribbon I could grab, and now today it's nowhere to be found. This is the sheer ribbon with a little bit of silver running behind it, and I'm just going to grab a piece that I can stick behind there just to add a little pop to the card. And so I'm going to run some adhesive that the ribbon will stick to, kind of cross it over, and we'll put it like that, and then we'll just put our happy birthday sentiment on top. Sometimes when I'm doing that, I like to even though we've got some bulk to it, the card itself is still flat enough that it is going to mail very easily. And I will do a quick weight on this when we are done, to make sure that it isn't going to require extra postage when you mail it. I always like when my cards don't require extra postage. I just thought the front needed a little bit more than what it had. All right, so there we go. Let me grab my mailer thing. This is something that my husband got actually at the post office. They gave it to him. So I know if my card fits through here, it's going to not have any problems going through the mail machines. The Country Hive also makes a tool that you can use for siding cards if that's something you're interested in. Or another trick that generally works is if you use this part of your cutter and your card fits through it. I need to go this way because I don't want that bow to come off. It is thin enough, so I'm just sliding it through where I had my pencil going. It is thin enough that it fits through that. That's just a quick sort of little test that you can do. And then let me grab my postage meter scale. It's been so long since I've used it, I don't even know where it is. Right there. Make sure that it's zeroed out. And that comes in at 6 ounces. So even if I were to throw an envelope on top, it's still at 7 ounces. So this is still going to take just one postage stamp to mail. I would be careful how much bulk you add to it in terms of raising too many of the pieces or anything like that, just so that it doesn't get too thick. But that is the finished card. So even though it takes just a little bit of time to cut those rectangles out, I found that by drawing the lines on the back like I showed you, it really made it a much easier card to create. Honestly, I was able to do these cards in fairly short order because once I started cutting the rectangles, it became a pretty simple thing for me to follow through on. So this is the triple matte layered card. Like I said, I've got an anniversary card, or be a cute Valentine card. The Mediterranean designer series paper, really summery, really bright colored card. Happy New Year with gratitude for that one. And the happy birthday card. 5 different occasions, 5 different cards, very different looks, all the same layout, very easy to make. So again, your layers are going to be 5.5 by 8.5 for the base of the card. Your designer series paper is going to be 4 by 5.25, and you'll just cut out those 2 layers. And the 2 layers of cardstock measure 3.25 by 4.5 and 2.25 by 3.5. And again, the way I drew the pencil marks on the designer series paper, you could easily do that on this layer, and nobody's going to know because it's going to be covered out, and that could, or covered up, which could save you a little bit of cardstock too. Totally up to you on how you want to do that. I hope it's helped to see how the card layout is in person, and also to see how I did that with the designer series paper to make sure I had consistent edges and layers for that shape. You could easily do this with circles or squares. Just depends on the look that you're going for with your card. And like I said, all the places I have designer series paper, you could also just use like a basic white cardstock and stamp your images right on that. That's how I originally learned this technique. If you are going to do that, then of course you'd want to leave the cardstock at 4 by 5.25, do all of your stamping, and then come back and cut through just like I did with that designer series paper. I hope I've inspired you to give this a try. Maybe look at some of that designer series paper you've got stacked up and see if you can come up with some of your own fun designs. If you do that, feel free to drop a picture into the comments. I love to see what other people create, and I think it's important that we help inspire each other with our creativity. And until next week, have a great week. Bye-bye.